Today we are continuing a worship series that is exploring some of the questions Jesus asked according to the Gospels. As we learned last week, there are over 300 of them. That's a lot of questions. Far too many for us to cover in a worship series. So, we are going to explore just a few of the ones we thought were particularly engaging. Today's question is, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? As we dive in, I want you to take a moment to think about some of the possible reasons why Jesus asked this question. On a general level, we know he is asking it because at least some people aren't following his teachings, even though they call him Lord. That's a given. But I want you to go deeper than that. I want you to think about what specific actions or attitudes his followers might have been exhibiting that didn't measure up to Jesus' teachings. If you want to make it a bit more relevant for today's world, what actions or attitudes do you think modern Christians are exhibiting that don't measure up to Jesus' teachings? Try and be as specific as possible about the things people do or don't do that would cause Jesus to question their faith in and commitment to him. Once you have an example or multiple examples in mind, keep that in your mind as we go through today's message and see if any of the actions and attitudes Jesus talks about are on the list of things you thought of. All right, let's start with a little context. Today's question is found in the 6th chapter of Luke. In that chapter, we are told that Jesus went down to a level place so that he could teach his followers. The lesson that follows is quite a bit like the Sermon on the Mount that is found in the Gospel of Matthew. Some people believe what happens here in Luke is a different version of that same sermon. Others believe it is an entirely separate event. Either way, this Sermon on the Plain contains teachings that are essential for us to understand as followers of Jesus. And while there are certainly other teachings that are important for us to follow, these are the ones Jesus talks about right before he asked our question for the day. So we're going to focus on them. His sermon starts with a series of blessings and woes. And as is often the case in Luke, the blessings are focused on the poor, the hungry, and the hurting, while the woes are focused on the rich, the well-fed, and those who seem to have everything. And then Jesus dives right in with a list of to-dos and to-don'ts we are supposed to be following if we call him Lord. Love your enemies. Now, there are some people who try and soften this commandment by saying there are circumstances in which they don't apply, or by redefining what it means in a way that makes them more comfortable with what Jesus is saying. Be very wary of such proclamations and the motives behind them. I'm pretty sure Jesus said what he meant and meant what he said. After all, his next few instructions build on this first one, further clarifying its meaning. For example, do good to those who hate you. He even calls us to bless those who curse you. And I'm pretty sure Jesus wasn't talking about the good old-fashioned Southern phrase, well, bless your heart. We all know what that means. He then called his followers to pray for those who mistreat you. And no, this is not a prayer of ill will or correction, but of grace and love. Jesus then closes this first part of instruction with words that put to rest any doubt about the grace we are supposed to offer even to our enemies. If someone slaps you on the cheek, turn to them the other one also. That is pretty much the opposite of an eye for an eye. Now, these words are hard, and I get the temptation to rationalize them or to try and find some exceptions. A lot of Christ followers do just that, and apparently they always have, which is why Jesus included them on his list of what we should be doing if we call him Lord. So how's your list measuring up so far? Have any of the things you've thought of shown up yet? If not, don't worry, there's still a lot more to come. After talking about how we are called to love our enemies and those who mistreat us, Jesus continued with the following instructions. And spoiler alert, they aren't any easier. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you. If anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. As with the previous things on the list, some people have a lot of reasons why Jesus didn't mean for us to literally do all these things all the time. After all, if we did, we would eventually run out of things to give, including shirts. But even if we don't live into this in a literal way, we are still called to live in ways that exemplify what Jesus is talking about here. On a recent trip, I saw signs like this one posted at every intersection. This one says, panhandling. It's okay to say no for your safety and theirs. Please give to local charities that help those in need. While I'm not opposed to giving money to people who ask for it on the street, I do think it's a good idea to donate to agencies that are equipped to help people in need. My concern is that a lot of people focus on the top part of the sign, using it as a reason not to help those in need directly, while also not giving to local charities who do that kind of work. If you want to follow Jesus' teaching, you can't have it both ways. There is simply no doubt that Jesus calls us to care for the poor. And if you are trying to sort out what to do or give in any given situation, you might want to begin by following Jesus' next instruction. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you were on the other end of a request for help, what would you want someone to do for you, to give to you, or for someone you love and care about? Now, after giving this part of the Sermon on the Plains to do and to don't list, we get these words from Jesus that build on what we've talked about so far. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because God is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Creator is merciful. Can we pause on that last part for just a second? This part right here. God is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Now, I know this flies in the face of what a lot of people think and teach about God, but here it is. Luke 6:35, for those of you who want to fact check me. The core of the gospel is love, grace, and mercy. Full stop. So one of the most important things we can do as Christ followers is to practice those things above all things, no matter who the recipient might be. All right, how's your list doing so far? Has Jesus named any of the actions or attitudes that you had in mind? If so, well done. If not, you've still got a few more chances. The next item on Jesus' to do and to don't list is, do not judge, and you will not be judged. And do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. I could preach 100 sermons on these two things alone. And there are some folks who may need to sit through those sermons twice. Again, the gospel of Jesus makes it clear. We are never supposed to judge others. We are never supposed to condemn others. Instead, Jesus calls us to forgive, and we will be forgiven. To encourage us in that effort, Jesus says of all three of these things, give and it will be given to you. A good measure pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For the measure you give, it will be given to you. Now, I don't know about you, but a good measure of God's forgiveness sounds a lot better than a good measure of judgment and condemnation. So while I may not be perfect in my efforts, I will always try to err toward grace and restrain from judgment and condemnation as much as possible. All right, so here's the part in the Sermon on the Plain where Jesus stops preaching and starts meddling. This is the part where it gets personal. When we see a question like the one we are talking about today, we are often quick to focus our attention on the behavior of others. And it can be pretty easy for us to create a list of actions and attitudes other Christians need to correct. But Jesus didn't preach the Sermon on the Plain so that we could use it to point out the flaws of others. It was meant to be a check on ourselves. To get at what Jesus was trying to say, our list of actions and attitudes that need to be corrected should always be focused on us, on ourselves, the places where we fall short. Here is how Jesus put it. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your sibling's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your sibling, "Let me take the speck out of your eye," when you yourself fail to see the plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First, take the plank out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your sibling's eye. Jesus then goes on to talk about the fact that the things we do and say are more a reflection of who we are than anyone else. How we treat others, how we speak to and about others, how we judge others. All of those things say more about us than they do about the person on the receiving end, no matter what we think about the things they may have said or done. Again, here's how Jesus talks about that. A good person brings good things out of the good stored up in their heart. And an evil person brings evil out of the evil stored up in their heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. That is right after saying those words that Jesus asked, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you?" Again, the question isn't, why does someone else call me Lord, Lord, and does not do what Jesus tells them? He's asking that question to and about each one of us. Not those people, you. Not them, me. While it may be easier and a little more satisfying to create a list of actions and attitudes that others need to correct, we probably shouldn't do that until we've corrected all the things on our own list. And I've yet to meet the person who's successfully done that. Jesus closes his sermon with a parable many of us have known since we were children. He says that anyone who hears his words and then lives into them is like a wise builder who digs down deep into the earth to find a firm foundation, creating a house that can stand against a rising flood. But those who hear Jesus' words and do not live into them are like a foolish builder whose home does not have a firm foundation. When the floods rise, that house will be destroyed. Which builder are you? Which builder do you want to be? All right, now that we've laid out all the reasons why Jesus asked today's question, I think we've got to answer it at least a little bit. Why do we call him Lord, but do not do what he says? Well, one answer is that it's hard. And that's fair. It is hard, and we will never be perfect in our efforts, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Another answer is that we just don't want to. If we're being honest, there are times that this is our real answer. We know what Jesus teaches. We just don't always want to do it. My hope is that in those moments, we will remember that the things Jesus calls us to do or not do are not meant to restrict our lives or spoil our fun. They are meant to give us an abundant life. They are meant to help bring God's kingdom to this earth. And maybe, just maybe, by focusing on how we are doing when it comes to those things, more than we focus on how other people are doing, that kingdom will come a whole lot sooner. Amen.